Hello, and welcome back to the Sad Crime Channel. Today's case took place in upstate New York in 2015, and it's especially shocking because the witness was a 7-year-old girl, the victim's daughter. Kelley Stage was born on August 1st, 1980, in Elmira, New York, to Elizabeth and Howard Stage. She was the youngest of 3 children, with an older brother, Lenny, and a sister, Kim, who was 10 years her senior. Her father, Howard, served as the chief of the local volunteer fire department, making the Stage family well respected in their community. During her high school years at Elmira Free Academy, Kelley was an honor roll student, actively involved in various extracurricular activities, including cheerleading, softball, and gymnastics. She graduated in 1998. After high school, Kelley pursued higher education at the State University of New York in Waukegan, where she earned a degree in education. Following her graduation, she moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, where she initially worked as a teacher before transitioning to a role as a cocktail waitress. It was during her time in Las Vegas that Kelley met Thomas Clayton, a professional hockey player who played for the Elmira Jackals, a minor league team based in Elmira, New York. From the day they met, they became inseparable and didn't waste any time. Within a year of their first meeting, they decided to get married. The early years of their marriage revolved around hockey. All of their plans had to be adjusted to the schedule of the season's games, but this lifestyle suited the young couple. However, an unexpected and unplanned end to Tom's career, caused by an injury, was on the horizon. Though he recovered, he had no chance of returning to professional play. In search of a new direction in life and a fresh career path, Thomas and Kelley moved to Charlotte, North Carolina for 5 years. In 2012, they returned to New York and settled in Clayton, a town near Elmira. Kelley was happy to be able to see her family more often. By this time, the couple had 2 children, a daughter, Charlie, and a son, Cullen. Kelley was thriving in her role as a mother. The children became her whole world. She began working part-time as a waitress, but primarily focused on raising her children. After retiring from professional hockey, Thomas worked as a manager for Paul Davis Emergency Services, a company specializing in property damage restoration. In this role, he oversaw various restoration projects and managed the company's operations in the Elmira area. Later, along with a business partner and former teammate, he also started a property management company. Thomas and Kelley seemed to have created a happy family, although over time, Kelley's relatives began to notice some inappropriate behavior from her husband. Tom had no inhibitions when telling jokes, and Kelley often had to apologize for him. He was known for his confident and outgoing nature. He was described as charismatic and sociable, often engaging in community events and maintaining a wide circle of friends. Thomas was known for his aggressive style of play, which often led to on-ice altercations. During the 2005 to 2006 season with the Elmira Jackals, he engaged in multiple fights, including a notable bout against Adam Brand of the Port Huron Flags on November 26, 2005. His reputation as an instigator made him a prominent figure among fans who were captivated by his confrontational approach during games. This made him a fan favorite and somewhat of a local legend. When he appeared in bars, it was common for someone to buy him a drink. His personality didn't stop at the ice rink. In real life, it was also easy to provoke him, and he had a reputation as a partygoer and womanizer. In April 2003, Clayton and another team member were accused of being involved in a fight with 4 local police officers. The altercation began in a downtown bar after Thomas started dancing naked on the bar. They were ordered to stop exposing themselves in public, but he refused, and a confrontation ensued. Ultimately, Thomas and Brad were charged with assault and disturbing the peace. It seemed that after retiring from his career and starting a family, Thomas should have left behind his old habits. Unfortunately, this did not happen. In addition to his volatility, he developed an obsession with money. He loved boasting about his wealth, buying luxurious items, and indulging in gambling. Despite this, he and Kelley seemed happy. It's often said that opposites attract, and Kelley tried to balance her husband's eccentricities. On April 28, 2015, the 35-year-old Kelley was at home with the children while her husband went to play poker with friends. Thomas returned home half an hour after midnight and made a shocking discovery. His wife was lying unconscious on the kitchen floor. He immediately dialed emergency services, but it was clear from the outset that it was too late to save Kelley. She had been brutally beaten.
Help me, my wife's dead.
Is she breathing at all? Nothing?
No, touch me.
Okay, is she beyond CPR?
Yes. Just touch me. Let him do with my kids. You'll see when they get here.
While waiting for help to arrive, Thomas took the children to a neighbor's house to prevent them from seeing their mother in such a state. A police patrol arrived soon after. Investigators were shocked by Kelley's condition. Her face was so beaten that she was barely recognizable. There was blood everywhere, and there were drag marks leading upstairs. Based on these marks, it was concluded that she had been attacked in the bedroom. It appeared that Kelley had been injured, but had not immediately lost consciousness. She managed to escape to the children's room, where blood was also found on the door. She tried to hide and protect her children, but unfortunately, the attacker or attackers managed to get to the room and continued the assault in front of the children. A dent in the wall at the foot of the stairs suggested that Kelley had been pushed down them. The impact of her head hitting the wall must have knocked her unconscious. She was later dragged to the kitchen where her body was left. The cause of death was head injuries inflicted with a blunt object. The motives for the crime were completely incomprehensible. None of Kelley's loved ones could point to anyone who would want to hurt her so brutally. The investigation focused on questioning Thomas, as there was hope that he could shed light on the situation. He was distraught, but tried to cooperate with the police. From the very beginning, he made sure the investigators didn't suspect him of being involved in the crime. He said he had spent the evening with his friends, who could confirm his alibi, and then added that he had returned home in a company pickup truck, which was equipped with GPS. The police tried to be understanding, as the man had just lost his wife in tragic circumstances and was in shock. A robbery motive was not considered because it was immediately clear that there had been no classic break-in. The windows and doors were intact, and no valuable items were missing, even those that were easily visible and could have been quickly taken. The attacker or attackers had not searched the house or looked into any cupboards or drawers. There was no doubt that Kelley was the target of the attack, and the murderer had no intention of harming the children or taking anything from the house. It was decided to interview the 7-year-old daughter of the victim, Charlie, while being cautious due to the serious nature of discussing such an issue with a young child. To the shock of the investigators, it turned out that the little girl had witnessed her mother's murder. She had seen the attacker, and with the help of a psychologist, she was able to describe the event. She told the detectives that there was a stranger in the house who was hurting her mummy, and she was shouting, "Run, Charlie, run!" However, instead of hiding, Charlie went downstairs and witnessed what was happening in the kitchen. She saw the attacker beating her mum with a stick, which she later identified as a hockey stick. When asked if she was certain that the intruder was a man, she said yes, because his eyes looked like her father's. She was also able to describe the clothes the man was wearing: jeans, a black long-sleeved t-shirt and a mask, which Charlie recognized as one her father wore. She added, however, that it couldn't have been her dad, as there would have been no one to look after her and her brother. After careful analysis, it was concluded that Charlie's statement about the intruder looking like her father was because of the clothing, and not because the intruder was actually her father.
Where were you when this all went down?
Playing poker with my buddy.
Okay. She was home alone?
I came home and my daughter said there was a robber in the house and she saw them.
No, she got blood on the wall, blood on the steps. Looks like she was attacked in bed. There's blood all over. She's been dragged. Blood on the wall. Blood with a hole in the wall. Looks like a face plant into the wall.
There was blood everywhere.
Okay.
On my door, on the floor, not on the carpet though. And I thought she was dead when she was laying on the ground. And Daddy was out by cars. We were basically alone for like 20 minutes. Then he came home and then he was like, oh my God. Because he saw my mom on the floor with blood all over her.
Meanwhile, investigators learned of a person who might have wanted to take revenge on Thomas and his family, Michael Beard, a former employee who had worked for Thomas in every one of his businesses over a span of 5 years and had always been his right-hand man. Michael's and his family's fate had been closely tied to Thomas for a long time, as Thomas was both his boss and landlord. This meant that both his livelihood and his roof over his head were in Thomas's hands. It turned out that 2 weeks before Kelley's murder, Thomas had fired Michael for allegedly drinking alcohol during work. Michael denied these accusations. Later, Thomas also evicted Michael's partner and children from their home. Michael thus had a motive to seek revenge on Thomas. Michael was arrested and brought in for questioning. It was revealed that he had no alibi for the time of the attack on Kelley. His partner testified that he had left their home around 11:30 p.m. and returned about an hour and a half later. A polygraph test was administered, which Michael failed, and in the face of overwhelming evidence, he decided to confess to the crime. He confirmed that he had broken into the Clayton home and murdered Kelley, but he added a crucial and not very surprising detail. He had carried out the crime on the orders of his former boss, Thomas Clayton. Thomas had promised to pay him $10,000 for the job. It was revealed that as early as April 2015, Thomas had mentioned to Michael that he was considering a certain job that, as he put it, could lead to a prison sentence. He hadn't yet specifically mentioned that the job involved murdering his wife, but this suggested that the idea had been in Thomas's mind long before Kelley's death. A year before her murder, Thomas had doubled her life insurance policy to $1 million, most likely already planning the crime at that point. Michael had been in a very difficult financial situation, which made him more susceptible to manipulation, and Thomas had exploited this situation to his advantage. However, this wasn't the end of Michael's shocking confessions. He said that the plan had also involved setting fire to the house after the murder. This meant that Thomas either wanted or at least didn't care that his children might also die. All Thomas seemed to care about was collecting the insurance money for the damage to the house and cars stored in the garage. Michael confessed that he hadn't carried out the arson part of the plan because the children were in the house, and Thomas had promised that they would go to their grandmother's. On October 2nd, 2015, Michael was officially arrested on charges of first-degree murder, and it seemed that the path to convicting both men would now be straightforward. However, nothing could have been further from the truth. At one point, Michael decided to withdraw all of his previous statements, which was surprising, given that he had already pointed out to the investigators the location of the clothes he had worn during the murder, the location of the key Thomas had given him to gain access to the house and surprise the victim, and had also handed over the murder weapon, a wooden handle from a two-handed hammer, known as a blacksmith's hammer. So it wasn't a hockey stick, as Charlie had said, but probably just a misassociation with the shape of sticks her father used. Michael began to claim that Thomas had hired him that day not to kill his wife, but to simply set the house on fire. He stated that neither Kelley nor the children were supposed to be inside at the time. When Michael arrived at the house on April 28, 2015, he found an intruder who had just murdered Kelley. Fearing that he would be accused of the crime, Michael decided to run, but the real attacker ran into him as he was fleeing the house, leaving physical evidence on Michael's clothing. It was obvious that this new version of events was entirely fabricated, and in terms of Michael's conviction, his retraction of the statement no longer mattered much, because the evidence gathered was sufficient. This had a significant impact on Thomas's position in the case. Michael's retraction of his statements was crucial, as his earlier accusations had been based mainly on the confessions of the hired man. Michael's trial was scheduled for October 2016. He denied the charges. Ultimately, the jury did not believe his new version of events, and he was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was convicted in November 2016 and received the maximum sentence in February 2017. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As of now, he remains incarcerated at the Auburn Correctional Facility in Cayuga County, New York. During the investigation, it was also discovered that Michael hadn't acted alone that night. His acquaintance, Mark Blandford, had been paid $500 to act as a lookout outside the Clayton home during the attack. Mark claimed that Michael told him he only needed to set fire to the house on the owner's orders in order to collect insurance money. Mark waited in the car while Michael disappeared for nearly half an hour. When Michael returned, he only said that the children shouldn't have been there. Later, they both disposed of the evidence, including the murder weapon and clothing, but despite this, Mark continued to insist that he had no idea that a murder had taken place that night. Ultimately, Mark was sentenced to 3 to 6 years in prison for his role in the crime. He served approximately 3 years and 4 months before being released on post-release supervision in August 2020. In 2024, Blandford was arrested for a parole violation and held in Steuben County Jail pending a parole hearing. As of now, there is no publicly available information regarding the outcome of his parole hearing or his current status. Meanwhile, Thomas Clayton's conviction was in question. Investigators did everything they could to bring the man to trial, and they succeeded in January 2017. It was still necessary to prove that he and Michael had communicated about the murder in the weeks leading up to the crime. A large amount of data from their computers and phones was analysed, and although no direct conversations were found, it was noted that the two men had frequently communicated, despite Michael no longer working for Thomas. Michael received several calls from various locations, which raised suspicions among the investigators. One call came from an auto shop, even though Michael did not own a car at the time. In this case, it was proven that Thomas was the one making the calls. Using GPS, it was established that Thomas was at the exact location when the call was made. When the murder occurred, Thomas was in a bar with friends, playing poker. As news of Kelley's fate spread throughout the neighborhood, the manager of the bar remembered an important detail from that night. At one point, Thomas had asked her to borrow a phone and went into a nearby room to make a call. After a moment, he returned, handed back the phone, and casually resumed playing poker. When the woman later learned of the tragedy that befell Kelley, she decided to check the phone records to see who Thomas had called that evening. It turned out that Thomas had deleted the number from the call history, which immediately seemed suspicious, especially since, for some reason, he had used someone else's phone, despite his own phone being fully functional. Experts managed to recover the data, and it turned out that he had called Michael. The call was made at 10:50 p.m., 90 minutes before Thomas returned home, and found his wife on the kitchen floor. Additionally, footage from the night of the murder showed a red pickup truck parking at Thomas's company parking lot at 1 a.m. The driver then left on a bicycle. The same vehicle had been used by the perpetrator of the murder. Even more intriguingly, shortly before the tragedy, Thomas had given Michael a bicycle since Michael did not own a car. The red pickup did not belong to Thomas, but to a friend who had lent it to him for a few days, which is why the vehicle had not been previously linked to the company. During Thomas's trial, over 70 witnesses testified. Among them were several women who had affairs with Thomas while he was married. One of these women had been underage at the beginning of their relationship, and Thomas was reportedly often critical of his wife, calling her lazy and ungrateful. The motives for the crime turned out to be very mundane: money and women. Thomas was addicted to gambling and had an obsession with money. He wanted to get rid of his wife but didn't want to share his wealth or pay alimony. He planned to start a new life with his lover, or multiple lovers, and, in the process, claim a large payout from his wife's insurance policy. To him, all of this was more valuable than the lives of his own children and the woman who had loved him for years. Efforts to convict him for attempting to murder his children were abandoned, as this aspect of the case was deemed impossible to prove. He was convicted of first-degree murder in February 2017 for orchestrating the murder of his wife, Kelley stage Clayton. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In November 2019, a New York State appellate court upheld his conviction, affirming the jury's decision. As of now, Thomas Clayton remains incarcerated, serving his life sentence. Following the tragic death of Kelley Clayton, her two children, Charlie and Cullen, were placed under the care of Kelley's sister, Kim Bourgeois, and her husband. This arrangement provided the children with a stable and supportive environment during a challenging time. In 2017, a trust was established to support the children's health, education, and general well-being. The trust aimed to ensure that Charlie and Cullen had the necessary resources for their upbringing and future endeavors. The tragic death of Kelley left an indelible mark on those who loved her. A devoted mother, sister, and friend, her life was stolen by the very man who had vowed to protect her. But in the face of unimaginable loss, Kelley's children found strength in the love and support of family, especially their Aunt Kim, who stepped in to raise them. Though the pain of their loss will never truly fade, the truth about Kelley's death was revealed, and justice was served. Michael Beard, Mark Blandford, and Thomas Clayton all faced the consequences of their actions, but the real heroes in this story are the children Kelley left behind, Charlie and Cullen. In the midst of tragedy, their resilience stands as a testament to the love and light that Kelley gave them, and through it all, her spirit lives on in the hearts of those who remember her.